So it's great to be here, first and foremost. Quite a few familiar faces that certainly I haven't seen for at least 18 months. I'm Richard Kennedy. I am the Chief Innovation Officer at Whitespace. Whitespace is a team that comprises of technologists, researchers, former CTOs, and founders. And it's our job to help some of the world's largest organizations overcome their technical and innovation challenges. Today, we're going to talk about innovative technology adoption. We've changed the title slightly. Today is Innovate or Die. So, innovation and digital transformation is at the top of every agenda. And it's in the boardroom of every major corporation. Unfortunately, a lot of those corporations don't understand what they need to do. They simply know that they have to do it. Digital transformation is one of the most commonly used buzzwords. Its interpretation varies by organization and by individual, which makes the ecosystem incredibly confusing. A recent McKinsey survey highlighted that 57% of corporate CIOs would implement a proof of concept from a startup. So what does that tell us? Well, first and foremost, it tells us that 57% of those corporate CIOs are technology-led. They're open to new ways of thinking. They're open to new ways of doing things. But it also tells us that there is still 43% that are happy doing what they're doing. They're going to remain stagnant. And while that happens, their competitors are actively disrupting the market. So where's technology focused? Obviously, everybody knows the last 18 months, coming up nearly 2 years, COVID highlighted the fact to a majority of businesses that they were not ready to go digital. The idea of working at home was absurd. So, how do companies adopt innovation? Well, we know from experience that most organizations will try to build it themselves first and foremost. If they have internal capability, first and foremost, it'll help them to reduce costs, but they feel that if they don't build it, it won't be done properly. And unfortunately, we know that that often leads to a failure to innovate. That behavior, that mindset, the overall organization culture, it's more prevalent in traditional businesses, manufacturing, for example, manufacturing and construction. We often see it in the automotive industry, which is typically considered to be incredibly innovative, especially with the electrification of vehicles. So, how does a company adopt innovation? Well, it's not that simple. But first and foremost, it starts with the business leaders. It's about that mindset, it's about that culture. It's about investing and enabling in individuals to allow them to take time out, to allow them to tinker, to allow them to try and innovate and perform research. Research, research, research is the basis of all forms of innovation. Alternatively, you can also procure it. But companies are not getting innovation. In most cases, an organization, an internal stakeholder, will create a request for quotation or a tender document. And at that moment in time, they've already decided what innovation looks like. They've already decided what they want based on their limited knowledge and their interpretation of what digital transformation is. And they've also assigned a budget to it, which will stifle that innovation within their organization. So, where do you start? Innovation has to start with business model innovation, first and foremost. So, I'd like to take you through a few examples once I cover off our internal process. Whitespace has an incredibly unique 8-step gated innovation program. When we engage with a client, whether a corporation, for example, they have the ability to onboard at any one of these gates. So they can join at any one of these steps, depending on the maturity of the problem or the challenge that they're trying to overcome. They can also offboard at any stage as well. So for example, if it's early concept stage, we can start off at stage 1, which is discovery and prioritization. We can then move forward into exploration sprints, validation sprints, again, just to understand customer desirability, technical feasibility, etc. And then we can move right through to design and prototyping, the release of a MVP, minimum viable product, and we can then help them to grow and support. So spin in, spin out, go to market, etc., etc. So let me give you a couple of examples of how this process has worked in the past. The very first one that we have here is called the Emergent Alliance. Back in 2020, when COVID started making headlines, Rolls-Royce enrolled in the ventilator challenge. Most of you will probably heard Dyson, for example, McLaren. So Rolls-Royce Civil enrolled in the ventilator challenge. However, their data labs team also wanted to support the crisis. So they had engaged with Whitespace and they had proposed at a very early concept stage that they wanted to consolidate open source, private and public data to inform local governments, to allow them to understand the social and economic impact of the pandemic. Now, it wasn't just Rolls-Royce and Whitespace. We engaged with and we worked with incredibly closely Google, Microsoft, IBM, and we succeeded in a 4-week period. One of my colleagues said yesterday, 4 weeks is absolutely incredible, but the fact of the matter is we broke every rule in the book. And that's how they achieved it so quickly, because they were able to move fast and they had the experience and they had the capability to do it. So how did that work out? Well, the research proved to be incredibly valuable. The information made its way to Sage. It made its way to Boris Johnson. That's where it stops. We accept no liability for what happened after that point. And it went to prove that large technical organizations can come together and can work together to solve challenges incredibly quickly. The next one we have is Shell. Shell Retail engaged with Whitespace quite recently. They understand that their traditional franchise and direct business model is under threat, and it has to change. It's not immediately, but they have to adopt and they have to change their business within the next 5, 10, 15 years, because in reality, their customers are not going to be pulling up to the forecourt to fill their car with fossil fuels and to go in and pick up a loaf of bread. It's a world of electrification, and the important part is that Shell understands that. They know that they're a petrochemical company living in a world of electrification, and because of this, they've embarked on a business model that has innovation at the heart of it rather than technology. And they did this because they understand that they need to be innovative. Whilst they can and they know they shouldn't build it themselves, and they shouldn't pay one of the big consulting firms to design and build it on their behalf. They needed to reevaluate their entire business model and then align it against the technology. That's digital transformation. This is what other organizations are struggling with. And they're struggling with it because they need to take a step back and criticize themselves. They need to be critical of the business and their model. A side effect of companies trying to play catch-up is that they'll very, very quickly adopt technologies and implement those technologies. But they haven't confirmed if the business model itself is capable of supporting it. Innovation has to start with the business model and not the technical model. Another example is GlaxoSmithKline. I've been with Whitespace for coming up 7 weeks. And the very first client that I engaged with was GSK. And it has been a truly enjoyable experience. Number one, it's an enormous corporation, GSK, but they get it. They understand what they need to do. And we're working with them to build out an incredibly unique concept under the project name of SAGE. And SAGE combines a physical probiotic with technology. And you'll hear more about that within the next few months. So, key takeaways. Building something doesn't mean to say that your customers are going to use it or even want it. So you have to have innovation, adoption. You have to be innovative in the way that you communicate. So if you're introducing new capabilities or technologies into your organization, you have to communicate with your employees and your stakeholders. You need to tell them how to use it, why they should use it. We call it evangelism. You have to be customer-led. And you have to be customer-led to make sure that you're delivering a truly customer-centric experience. And if you don't, you're simply building something for the sake of it because you believe that it might work. You have to be design-led. You have to test it again, test it some more, probably test it again. And you have to innovate yourselves. The 3 R's of the innovation success process is research, research, research. We talked about it earlier. It is massively important. If you want to be successful, you need to perform the research. It's not discretional. It's as fundamental as the office toilets. So, I hope you enjoyed that. It was great to meet everyone today and to see you. We are based over on Stand 8. There's a couple of really interesting things happening. First and foremost, we have a new product that we're launching. We also develop our own IP. So in mid-November, we're launching a new product that may be of interest to you. You can find out more at Stand 8 by picking up one of our QR codes. And we're also actively recruiting for a number of careers, so feel free to have a chat with the team over there. Thank you very much, everyone.